So if you're feeling at all lost or unfulfilled or disconnected from your sense of purpose, stay tuned for today's show, because today we're talking about reconnecting with your soul. Hello and welcome back to the Spiritual Freedom Show with Richard Lawrence. My name is Darren Ball, and this is the podcast helping seekers to awaken their chakras, unlock their psychic powers, and discover true spirituality. In this episode, we're going to be talking about, what is the soul anyway? Is it a real thing, or is it just a concept? We're also going to be talking about soul repression, what you can do to unrepress your soul, what you can do to make a deeper connection with your own higher self, to discover your destiny, your purpose in life, and also chakras. Richard has a lot of experience in chakras, and we're going to be talking about chakras and their role on your path to enlightenment. Perhaps you feel blocked in some way, and there's something in this show that can help you. Finally, we're also going to be talking about Carl Jung and some pretty interesting mystical revelations that he made, some of which you've probably never heard before. So if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that bell so you don't miss any future conversation between Richard and myself. Richard.
Darren.
So today we're talking about reconnecting with our soul. And I know this is one that resonates with people a lot. I know I've been there before in my life as well. Mm-hmm. And I think for a lot of people, this disconnection manifests as like a feeling lost, unfulfilled, possibly lacking, a sense of purpose or meaning in life. And that's kind of the heart of our message, actually, that we'd like to explore on the show. I mean, how people can overcome that. Sometimes I think it's sometimes it's due to like the social kind of pressure to conform to the kind of modern secular life that we have, and often that's a very busy pace of life, and one that usually neglects our inner life. And so it's no surprise we feel a lot of these things. But what I wanted to explore on this show to you was why we get disconnected from our soul. Why does that happen? What's gone wrong? But also then more importantly, what can people do to reconnect? Yeah. So maybe we can just set the scene quickly. What do we mean by our soul? What are we talking about there?
Well, the soul is the highest aspect of our being other than one, which is the spirit. And the spirit, the greater part of that is not even in manifestation. Mm-hmm. So you could say that the soul is the greatest, the highest, the very highest, most super conscious aspect of mind.
And something that we all have.
Of course.
And so then then the next question is, why does this disconnection manifest? What's happening there, maybe in our life or the way that we live it?
I'm really glad that you've picked this topic, actually, Darren, because I've said for years, and I'm going to say again now, if I may, that what people don't talk about in this world is soul repression. And if you look at psychology, other than one or two pioneers, and Carl Jung tried to be one, I think he was closed down at times by his colleagues and peers at the time. And in fact, when he had one set of experiences, which is in the Red Book, I've got that. Have you got that?
I actually bought that.
I think you're the two.
It was one of the first.
There are very few people who have the Red Book. Yeah. I do recommend it.
It's a massive.
Yes, it is.
Size, yeah.
But a lot of spiritual experiences are described in there. One of which I believe I'm right in saying is that he claimed to be a channel layout, say at one point. Channel layout, say. Yeah. I'd have to check that, but that's said anyway. But these were experiences which didn't fit within the remit of the conditioned approach to then or even now to psychology. And psychology as a whole, unless they are, as I say, pioneers or cutting edge spiritually motivated practitioners,
that's a good point.
They are missing out on the most important aspect of the mind. And very often, I'm no expert on psychology, I'm not claiming to be, but they use the word unconscious. But at best, what most of them mean is subconscious. And therefore, they talk about mental repression, sexual repression, emotional repression, and they're developing things like the idea of emotional intelligence as well as... And in fact, some people are looking at the concept, at least, of spiritual intelligence, which is a good thing.
I haven't heard that.
No, it's very rare. I don't think you find it in any orthodox practices, I don't think. But what they're missing out on is soul repression, which is the most important of them all. And people don't know about it. And you mentioned, the world as it is, and I think education... I went back actually to the university I was at recently for the first time for decades. And, I had some good memories of it, but it just reminded me, and of course far more people go to university now than did then, is all geared to a certain type of intelligence, a certain type of intellectuality, the rational, analytical approach. You don't get classes designed to take you towards the intuition, for example, in the universities, totally. Which you should, totally, because there lies greater knowledge, because the intuition, which is at best linked to the soul, high intuition is your closest connection to the soul, in a functional way, you might say. This can reach areas that other kinds of mentality can't. I mean, if you're studying a subject of any kind, be it history, be it a science subject, you only can use the data which is presented to you, the information which is readily available and known and recorded. And it may or may not be accurate, because history is extremely inaccurate. Nevertheless, people still come up with their theories based on it and make sometimes a successful career. But point being that, and of course what history is missing is the vital element of reincarnation. Without that, it can't be properly understood. But we'll revisit that. Yeah. But with intuition, though, if you are advanced enough, if you are connected enough to your soul, you can draw on knowledge and information which is not accessible to you readily. And of course, I'm not in favor, and we've talked about this before, of people throwing out, a terrible phrase actually, the baby with the bathwater. That's probably cancelled, I think, that phrase now. But, the value of intellect is there. I'm not saying it isn't. And some new agers who think, let's forget logic, let's forget intellect, they aren't going to get very far. You need both. But of the two, the intuition is the greater, because it's the more closely linked with the soul. What I would say is that true logic, as practiced, for example, by the very ancient Gnani yogis, the rishis and so on, in the forests, in the ancient Vedas, as recorded, and things like that, that kind of logic is meditation-based, which means it's tied into intuition. So the two work together and they come to exactly the same conclusion.
Yeah, I love that.
Which is a soul-driven conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, this resonates a lot with me because it's like what we're highlighting here is that there's this whole field which is designed to understand ourselves and the human condition, and yet it's missing an entire aspect of what we really are, and as you said, the most important aspect of what we really are. Yeah. I remember, very early on when I was just first exploring spirituality, I came across a book that said, I think it's From Intellect to Intuition or something like that. It's one of the theosophical books. Right. I saw the title, I thought, oh my God, that is it. That's what's been missing like my whole life. There's this whole element of it that's so much more than just the intellectual capacity and exploration that we, in the way that we explore our world around us. But I think there's also something else you said here about soul repression. I just wanted to come back to that point because, a lot of the things, these symptoms that we experience, like I was saying earlier, lack of purpose, meaningless, etc. I mean, we are repressing our soul, and I think, as you said before, we're repressing our conscience, and therefore. Our, the results, in terms of the way that we think, the way we act in the world around us, is what we see today, the repression of our soul, and these things wouldn't be happening, it seems to me, if we were more deeply in touch with our soul.
Absolutely. I mean, we on Earth are absolute experts at suppression. We suppress, and we suppress through the lives many impulses. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes there are certain desires some people may have that are best suppressed because they're not able to control them. Then suppress them because they could harm other people. But it's only still a short-term thing. In the end, they have to be controlled and transmuted. But, on the Spiritual Freedom Show, I think we give a take that you won't find in the same way anywhere else. And that's thanks to the 9 Freedoms, that's thanks to Dr. George King and the teachings he delivered through the Aetherius Society in general. And that is a technical, practical methodology, if you like. What is actually happening? What is technically happening when you suppress the soul? Not just physically, but psychically, because don't forget, the physical body is actually a reflection of the etheric body. It's not the other way around. And I think actually some theosophists got that wrong, actually. The etheric is more real than the physical. I'm looking at you now. It just so happens I can see you're etheric, not in any detail. That's not what we're here for. And others can do this. I mean, I teach people to do this. It's not difficult, really, with practice, if that's what you want to do. But just to see that it does exist, it's a real thing. And in that, you have many channels of energy that are flowing through it. And these blockages we talk about, that psychology might refer to as suppressions or whatever terminology they use, what they actually are is energy blockages within the aura. And they need to be cleared out. They need to be purified. Now, of the two, you can block out things that you might are desirable to block out. I mean, if you feel like punching someone in the face, and you jolly well suppress it, that thought, and don't do it, unless you're able to immediately transmute it, which you can by blessing them. By the way, there are ways of transmuting things, but if a person isn't up for that, then suppress it. We don't want you going around punching people just so that you express your your feelings. Don't do it. But sooner or later you'll have to. Now those blockages, I think in some ways the most dangerous or the most difficult, problematic blockages, if you like, are those that that are good ones, if you like, or come from the highest self, from the soul, if you like, rather than the bad ones. Now, the bad ones will have to be dealt with. Some of these desires, anger, resentment, fear, things that build up that you're not dealing with, will all have to be transmuted, all dealt with. And we have practices, because the practices that are used in the Ethereal Society, at least, are brilliant practices, because they get to the root of the problem and they transmute it. Just to name one, which we've named before, the violet flame practice. The violet flame practice, where you visualize a violet flame coming up from the Mother Earth, and in time you will feel it for sure. You might see it. I've certainly done that. So I met someone, I've never done this, but who smelt it. I don't know whether you have, but you'll certainly feel it, because it's a transmuting force. It actually comes from Mother Earth, and Mother Earth is all purifying, all transmuting, all love. Otherwise we wouldn't have experience at all without the Mother Earth. They were very wise, those ancient Greeks, who put Gaia, the goddess Earth, at the top of their list of gods.
I always remember.
Their, what was it called? Their
pantheon.
Pantheon. Thank you very much. Yeah. So that's a great practice. But I want to mention another one too, which is the way that we practice in the Ethereal Society, thanks to Dr. George King, how we practice praying. Now, there'll be some watching this or listening to this who don't know what we do at all, and that's great, and we welcome you to the Spiritual Freedom Show. There'll be some who do this regularly but may not have realized just how significant it is, because every time that we pray, we don't just use words or indeed Sanskrit mantras, which are very powerful, some ways more powerful in certain respects. And we don't just think about it, and we don't just put passion into it and feel it as a real living force. We also visualize energy going out through the heart's chakra. We send it out through the palms of the hands, and every healer knows that, and you can feel that it can be burning actually at times. But the heart chakra, now that immediately puts this system of prayer, and this is controversial and great if it is, I can't worry about that. It puts it above any form of prayer which doesn't use that visualization. This is me saying it, this is my opinion. Dr. King, I don't think he said that, I don't know, but I think that.
Because you express
because you're activating then the center of love through your visualization. That's a much higher connection with the soul than basic thought. That's going towards the intuitive sense, towards higher consciousness. And immediately it's by and you do many things by that, by the way. In fact, in the 9 Freedoms, this book here, which we often refer to on this show, Mars Sector 6, who delivered the 9 Freedoms, actually says that to radiate love, these aren't the exact words, in its full, well, I'll get the exact words actually. Why not get the exact words rather than my words? He says this, he says, the love I speak of radiates from the two faces in balance. That's the two faces of the heart center. There are two faces. Some people call them petals.
Oh, yeah, petals.
Yeah, or the chakras.
Yeah.
So it radiates from the two faces in balance, the throat center, from the centers in the forehead, or forehead.
So the Christ center or third eye.
That's the third eye, of which there are three faces in the forehead, or the third eye, from all faces in balance. So that's, if you took it to its real limit, then you'd be practicing soul prayer, actually, is what you'd be doing then.
Yeah, I can see, in terms of what we're talking about here, it's almost like raising our consciousness, isn't it? By praying in that way.
Absolutely.
So it's like unrepressing the soul.
Yeah.
We're making deeper connection, and where we may have been deaf or unable to hear our intuition before, we would begin to be able to hear that. I think you would start to lead a life that turned away from the things that were not actually ultimately fulfilling, the materialistic trappings that tend to distract us away from our inner life, which we have neglected so much of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this isn't a show about chakras, but what I would say is this, that there isn't such a thing as a bad chakra at all.
That is a important message.
The lower centers, the base center at the base of the spine, the sex center, and the solar plexus center, all of which are lower than the heart center, of course, the heart center being in the center, not on the left, in the etheric body, in the aura. They're good. It's just the problem is that we have greatly overused them and misused them in certain cases. And we've terribly underused the higher centers, the heart center, the throat center, the Christ center, and the highest of all is the crown center. Those are grossly underused, barely used. If they are used at all, just partially used. And this is the main, if you like, what I was getting to there, functional or technical, if you like, reason why we have lost connection with the soul. If we reactivate those centers, we will gain greater connection with the soul. We'll still need to use the lower ones, and you'll have a kind of because the solar plexus center, for example, is a battery center. It's a very powerful center. It's a center of understanding, and it's very valuable. But it's an understanding that is limited if it's left without the influence of the higher chakras. And it needs the element of love to bring it towards intuition and to guide it towards a deeper, much more profound intelligence.
Well, I think it's wonderfully inspiring because, as you say, there are practices that we can use to raise our consciousness, to start to express that love that will bring us closer to the soul.
Can I just quickly say also about that visualizing energy going out through the heart center that we do when we practice what we call dynamic prayer? And people, some people listening and watching this will be doing this. And you're doing it because you want to help other people. That's what the heart chakra is all about, love. It's love directed. I mean, science without love is like the soulless wanderer in the realms of night. That's a quote from the Master Jesus, actually. You need that love energy for it to be. What's intelligent about using all your capabilities, your mental capabilities, might be your brilliance to design weaponry to kill other people. That's because it's not directed by love energy. It's directed by love energy. You could use that same intelligence, still would be valuable, that same mental ability and acuity to perhaps create healthcare or some other form of salvation. But I just want to finish on that dynamic prayer point. If you do this, yes, you're helping others, but you're also helping yourself, because every time you do it, if you do it successfully, if your visualization is focused and concentrated, you will to some degree activate your own heart center and draw energy, yes, through it, but also upwards towards it. Because activating a higher center draws energy to some degree upwards through those channels I spoke about. The yogis say there are 72,000 of them. I think actually Dr. King gave an even higher figure once.
Yeah, he did, yeah.
But I think he said hundreds of 242.
That's what I remember as well.
Yeah. But I mean, however many there are, we don't know where. We only know where the major ones are. But you'll draw the energy towards it. This will bring you what we're talking about today: a greater connection with your soul.
It's a beautiful promise. I thought I'd also bring in here, you mentioned earlier, just kind of like a teaser in the beginning of the show, Carl Jung. And you already kind of hinted that, beyond his contributions to psychology, he's had a profound impact in other areas as well, even, going into the mystical and beginning to explore spirituality, the human question, meaning, other elements like this. And I think actually many of the concepts he talked about, they seek this deeper understanding of these aspects of ourselves which are neglected by other schools of thought and even people, exploring psychology more generally. And I just wanted to bring in here some of the things that he had said, because I think they reflect this this deeper exploration and realization that he had and that he was trying to offer to people. So these are his words. He said, "You can approach the unconscious in only one way, namely by a purified mind, by a right attitude, and by the grace of heaven, which is the Kundalini." And I don't know any other psychologist who's ever even referenced Kundalini. Is that something?
No, I mean, I think it's a fantastic quote. I haven't checked the sort of authenticity of it. I don't know whether you have at all, but it's certainly up there. It is. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, well, that's great. What a wonderful thing that he would say that. I think some people closed him down. I think he was even told he'd had a nervous breakdown at one point.
So bad.
But it is completely true, of course. First of all, again, coming back to the unconscious mind, I think that's everything that isn't conscious in their language. And of course, Dr. King breaks this down into the subconscious, which is a functional, often memory-based aspect of mind, and also functional based. The subconscious knows how to walk, knows how to operate the body and do amazing things that the conscious mind couldn't actually do on its own. So it's brilliant. But it's not the superconscious. Superconsciousness is that one that we mentioned earlier, that is, if we really were in a superconscious state, we'd have a full connection with our soul. That's what samadhi is. You're bathed in superconsciousness. Yeah,
I totally agree. It sounds like what he's talking about there. And he's talked about a couple ways to do that. But what would you offer in terms of, if you had to distill it down in terms of what people can do to reconnect with their soul?
Well, first of all, let's take what he said, which is a purified mind. Well, yes, these blockages that I referred to in the aura, and I'm aware of them because of my own. It's work in progress for me. I have had a rise of Kundalini, as we've spoken about before, but not in its fullness. And I know very well now, as I never knew before, the reason. And the reason is because I have not purified all these blockages. And by the way, you can have blockages or impurities even in certain higher centers, which is quite surprising. And those who are familiar with the 12 blessings, have a look at the 8th blessing, and you'll see there a practice given, which refers to impurities in the heart being cleansed. And so and I can understand that completely, and I'll tell you an example of that. If, for example, you are your conscience is telling you you should be giving money to others. I mean, I think a lot of super rich, I gather, from what I've met many of them myself, and the one actually that I did know who was what I would call super rich didn't think she was super rich. She thought other people were super rich, which is kind of interesting. But often they can be extremely critical of material things and difficult to satisfy, I'm told, and so on. And it's because it's not because of those things. I mean, who really cares if there's a slight crease in the sheets of your bed? Some well-intentioned, but they really care about things like that, so I'm told. So some, this isn't all. And it's because they're not really satisfied themselves. Now, if you're in that position, a part of you, let's say you were super wealthy and you were using it all for yourself, maybe for your family, and that's all. A part of your conscience is going to be, every time you watch television and you see the disasters in the world, and you're not stupid, that you could save hundreds of lives.
That's...
without much effort at all, and you don't, you've blocked off, and this is only one example. It's not just the super rich. It could be people who aren't rich who could do a lot of things,
Sure.
or could not behave in certain ways. It applies to all of us, actually. Now, if we get that conscience and we get used to blocking it off, and this, I think, is where people like you and I, Darren, are different from Dr. King, who I knew very well, because I believe he was as pure as pure. I don't think he had this. I think he came to Earth, and I've written about this in a book called The King Who Came to Earth, which I wrote with Brian Kniep, without the past life impurities that build up. But what happens through the lives, through reincarnation, and by the way, psychologists did come up with past lives because they were trying to take people back to their childhood. And sometimes in these regressions, people went further, and this is where you get so-called past life regression, which I'm not necessarily recommending. I'm just saying they did it without even meaning to, some of them, because the past lives are real, and came up with amazing things. Like people identified, I think one identified a ceiling in a 17th century chateau in France that they'd never visited, has never been photographed, and indeed it was the way they described, and so on. Wow, unwittingly were coming up with evidence for reincarnation. But what happens, though? These impurities, we get used to it. We get habits. The ancients call them samskaras, habitual patterns of blockage. Now, if we're blocking off conscience in all its forms, we might be being unkind to family members. We might be not caring about the world like we should. All these things are being blocked. Those impurities exist even possibly in a center like the heart center, because that may be where it's coming from. Something has to stop, or we have stopped it from being activated. Blockages have occurred. They need to be transmuted. And as I mentioned earlier, the practices that we use in the Etheric Society, I only just mentioned a couple of them, are geared to two things on the whole. One is energy, because you need the energy to do it. The violet flame is an energy. Kundalini is the highest form of energy which will ever grace our being. And Carl Jung is absolutely right to call it the grace of heaven. He's right, actually, it's the grace of the Mother Earth, which is where it actually comes from.
So we're talking there about, I mean, one, you've mentioned the spiritual practice that we can do, how this energy can help transmute these impurities that we find even in the higher chakras. What else might you offer to people in terms of reconnecting with this?
So just saying there's the energy and there's the raising of the energy. And as I mentioned, just one example, every time you visualize white light in the violet flame, white light in the heart center or heart chakra, even just visualizing that, even not before you even pray, just visualize, and it's white because it contains all the colors of the spectrum. It's prana, it's chi, it's the energy of the universe, it's the universal life forces. If you visualize this coming down through you, down through the neck, the shoulders, and into the heart center, just doing that, it's a good thing. It will also start to feed your heart chakra, which is depleted, which is neglected in most of us, and it will start to activate it. It's very, very good for your well-being.
That's a beautiful promise as well, again, to make for people, because I think a lot of people do feel depleted in that way. So it's almost like too empty to be able to offer people something else, but it sounds like we can replenish ourselves, recharge ourselves, refuel, rekindle that flame within us.
Indeed, and then you go from there. Once the love is activated, you move straight into service because you want to. Because you're motivated to, because you are motivated by love energy, so you care. Some people, if you get a complete psychotic, and I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, let me say, but from what one gathers, such a person or a pathological person has blocked out what we might call the finer feelings. They don't feel conscience, they don't feel guilt, but it's there though. They've just, either through the lives, through past lives, or through some experience of some kind, and handling that experience in the wrong way, it might have been a terrible experience. They have blocked out the feelings, but they are there. They can be reactivated. And when they're reactivated and one feels this love true love. It's not sentiment. Sentiment is a tiny aspect of the function of the heart center. It's technically speaking, it's a partial activation by Kundalini of only one face, a partial activation of one face of the heart center. And emotionalism very often doesn't come from the heart center at all. It can come from a lower center, centers than that, yeah.
People wouldn't think that.
No, they don't understand. Love is not understood. You won't find a finer exposition than the 9 freedoms on love. So just briefly to summarize, you activate love, you gain a greater connection with the soul, you practice then service because you actually want to, because you're motivated to, whether that be through prayer, whether it be through physical ways, whether any kind of active service, love-motivated, love-driven service. And by doing that then, you change your karma. And I think we could go into a long topic here, but I don't think we've run out of time really on that.
Well, I think it's a beautiful summary because there's a path there for people back to reconnecting with the soul, with the understanding of why we become disconnected. And if we just think about love and its motivating force for us in service, and how they can raise our consciousness and also change the world, I think.
I'll say one more thing that they will do by love-motivated service and changing your karma, which you must do. We all do it all the time. Watching this or listening to this right now, you're changing your karma, because not only are you thinking about these things, you are giving power to these thoughts in the mind belt of Earth, which must affect others too.
Thank you very much, Richard. There's just so much that we can take away from that show about unrepressing our soul so that we can make a deeper connection with our own higher self. It's the key to transforming our lives. You start to learn to work with not just your intellect, but also your intuition, so that you can draw on knowledge and information that isn't readily accessible in other ways. It's also the key to transforming our world because our conscience comes to the fore. We feel for others more. We think and act more in alignment with our soul, essentially love and service to others, and move away from the materialistic trappings of our everyday lives, right? Things that tend to distract us from our real purpose, from what life is really about, from the real reason that we're here, from our spiritual practices, from helping others, etc. And I'm sure you caught it, but if you missed it, Richard shared a massive secret there into spiritual advancement, that we can repress things like emotions and desires for a time, and it may even be useful for a time to do that. But ultimately, in the end, these things must be controlled and they must be transmuted, because they are actually energy blockages in the aura, some scars as they tend to be called, patterns of habitual thought that must be cleared out, must be purified so that our chakras can function as nature intended in a balanced and harmonious way. Now, if you enjoyed that episode about unrepressing your soul, then check out this video over here that goes deeper into how to break free from deep state conditioning, or this video over here that goes deeper into finding your destiny. Thanks for tuning into the show. See you next time.